This video is going to be about synapses. Now, for me to talk about synapses, I first have to say a little bit about neurons. You may be familiar with the term neuron. That is a special type of cell. It's a nerve cell in the central nervous system. And some people will kind of simplify it and just say brain cells. All right, but the cells that will send signals, important signals for all of the stuff that, our brain tells the body to do, or what our brain processes. And I am using very oversimplified terminology. This is not a physiological psychology class. All right, so these neurons, for them to be able to send signals and receive signals, they have to be close enough together for that opportunity to be there. They do not touch, all right? So they do not touch, but the receiving part of the neuron, and if you are curious, all right, we might say we have the receiving part is typically the dendrite of the neuron, and they look like branches on your sort of typical standard default image of a neuron. And these dendrites, they have receptors on them, receptors that can receive signals. All right, try to keep it nice and simple, not go into too much detail. All right, for that to happen, for that to be successful, the sending part of another neuron, which is typically the axon, it often looks like the tail of a neuron, the axon has to be close enough that if it sends a chemical messenger called a neurotransmitter, if that chemical messenger is released from one neuron, for it to be received successfully by another neuron, they have to be close enough together. All right, so this space between neurons, we call that the synapse. The synapse is a space between neurons. You can't weigh a synapse. It's technically a space, but it is a space that is small enough so that there is an opportunity for signaling, an opportunity for communication between neurons. All right, so the formation of synapses is an important part of development. In early development, in prenatal and infant development, an important part of development is for these synapses to form. So the dendrites, the receiving parts, they branch out. Fancy terminology is they proliferate. They branch out, they kind of reach out like, all right, and they look exactly like I do right now. Not really. All right, so they spread their branches essentially so that they can be close to many other neurons to have the potential for communication, to have those synapses form. Now, in the first 2 years of life, you generally have this proliferation, this formation of synapses, forming lots and lots and lots of synapses. Like, hey, if we need this communication pathway, we're going to have this communication pathway. But then, after around age 2, after you have your peak of branching out at around age 2, we start to see another pattern be dominant. You start to see something called synaptic pruning. And pruning is when you kind of clean house and you get rid of the synapses that have not been used, that you don't need. Now, I like to point out, because sometimes I will get interesting questions from students where they kind of go into the panic and they say, oh my gosh, does that mean like if you don't learn an important skill in the first 2 years of life, does that mean like your brain's not going to know that you need it and it's going to prune it away? The thing is, the stuff we prune away is stuff that like you're not likely to need at all. It's not like if you don't learn to play the piano before age 2, you're going to prune away anything that would be needed for learning how to play the piano. It's not that extreme. It's actually an efficient system. It's an efficient system where you are clearing away the pathways that just there's no need for them at all. They're not getting used at all. All right, so that's what you get with synaptic pruning. All right, it's meant to be this efficient system where you keep the stuff you seem to need, or there's the potential for those pathways to be needed. All right, and so after age 2, you see a lot of pruning. It's one of the many things that helps signaling in the brain become more efficient. And if you want to learn more detail about it, you can take further classes in human development or physiological psychology.